Okay, I'm Steve Farrell. Um, I was born January 5th, 1947. I just turned 78 years old. I grew up here on the dairy farm here in Midway, down in the Stringtown area. My father came from Ireland. He came in about 1915. He ended up in Montana herding sheep. When he came alone, and he was up there working, and the Wilson, J.B. Wilson from Midway here, went up and bought the herd of sheep, and he says, "What are you going to do now?" And my dad said, "I don't know, I guess I'll find me another job." And Mr. Wilson said, "Well, throw your saddle on the train and come with us." So that's how he got to the valley. My mother grew up in England. Her family was from England, and they met a missionary from Charleston that converted the kids, and that caused them to come. And they came in about 1920. I don't know the exact year, but they came to America in 1920 and ended up here in Midway. They lived over here on the corner of 250 and 500 South in that brick home. And there was 5 in the family, 2 boys and 3 girls. And they all stayed here in the valley. My mother met my dad in about 1918 here in the valley. She'd go up to the shearing corral and help cook for the crew, and that's how they met. I don't know exactly when they got married, but they got married in 1927, 1926, somewhere in that period. And Dad stayed with the sheep until the Depression came, and a lot of people went into financial trouble, and the people my dad was working with, they had to sell the sheep. And all the time my dad was working on the sheep, herding sheep, his mother would send him money from Ireland to go to school. And when the sheep was sold, he didn't have any place to go, so he took that money out of the Walker Bank in Salt Lake and bought this farm here on 500 South. And they had a dairy farm there, and he bought it, and that's where they stayed. And that's where I grew up, was on the dairy farm here in Midway. And I spent my younger days fishing and hunting over on Snake Creek, and we always had plenty to do working on the farm. And I stayed there and went to elementary school in Midway, at the old Midway Elementary School, and then I went to Heber, to the high school that was on Main Street, there where the city park is now. That's where I went to high school, and then when between my junior and senior year, they moved into the new high school on South Main Street. And that's where I was first graduating class out of that high school. From high school, I went up to Utah State and was going to school there, and that was right during the Vietnam conflict. So if you didn't go to school, you went to the military. And so I graduated from Utah State in 1969, and my mother and dad, when they came up to watch me walk for graduation, they bought my induction notice. So I was when I graduated, I was already ready to go to the service. And for some reason, they didn't take me right away. I spent the whole summer here waiting to go, and that's just where they started the state park. Earl Kohler was superintendent of the state park, and he came down and said, "Would you like to go to work for me?" So I worked with him, and it got down I was there about 6 months, and then I got notice I was to be inducted. So I went down to the induction center and was all ready to go in the Army. And from up to Utah State, there was 7 or 8 of us, right? We was all acquainted, so we decided we should make the best of this and go in the Army and have a great time as a group. Well, they came in and Marine Corps corporal came in and said, "I need 5 volunteers," and nobody ever volunteered. You told you don't volunteer. And so he started throwing record books across the floor to be selected, and I was the 3rd one to go across the record book, and they called me up and said, "You're now a proud member of the United States Marine Corps." And I said, "Oh, I can't be." And he said, "Yes, you are." And from that point on, I got preferential treatment. They put us right at the front of the line. And I looked back to thinking that the others with me would volunteer to go with me. They were looking at the floor, looking out the window, anything they could do to not make eye contact. So I was one of the 5 from the Salt Lake area who went to the Marine Corps. From the Marine Corps, I went through all the training and everything as they had laid it out. Then I had ordered to go to Vietnam. And for some reason, when I was standing on the tarmacs waiting to go, they came in and said, "There's 7 of you that's not going to be able to go now." And they would what they called blue tag because they needed room for a higher ranking person, a more essential person, I guess you'd say. So I stayed in California for about 3 weeks until they had another troop plane was leaving. So I got out on the tarmac again, and this time I went. And we went to Hawaii, landed in Hawaii, then we went to Okinawa. And they came on the plane and said, "We need these 4 individuals to get off the plane." And I was one of the 4 that departed from the plane. And I couldn't figure out why. And they said, "Well, the reason is that the unit you were assigned to, came back from Vietnam. They're here in Okinawa restaging." That was right when President Nixon started pulling the troops out of the Vietnam, and the Marines was the only military force that he had direct control over. He didn't have to have congressional approval to move them. And so he drew this unit out, and I was assigned to that unit in Okinawa. So I never made it to Vietnam, but the people that was in the unit, it was some awful stories they'd tell of what they went through, and you could be sleeping in the barracks at night and hear people get up screaming and having nightmares. I'm not surprised we don't have more trouble with the veterans that went through that with addiction and different things like that, because it's hard for them to cope with. And so I spent my time there and came back to the United States, and I was thinking of it as a career, but when I got back, I decided maybe I ought to spend some time at home. And so I came back and helped my dad on the farm and went back to work. Well, I better should say, after I worked at the state park, they started hiring for the the state started hiring for real estate appraisers. And that's one of the things I kind of took up in college, to be an appraiser. So about August of '69, I went down to Salt Lake and was hired as a real estate appraiser for the State Tax Commission. And I was there for a month, and I had my order to go. So I went, that's when I got drafted and went through it. And so when I came out of the service, I went right back down and got to get my job. And I got back on with the Utah State Tax Commission as a real estate appraiser. And I spent the next 38 years as a real estate appraiser for the state, going over the state, helping with appraisals of different kinds. I retired from the Tax Commission in 2005. Prior to that, in 2004, I ran for the county council, and I was elected in 2004. And when I found that the council time required more time than I thought it did, so that's when I decided to retire. So I retired in 2005. I was still helping on the farm. By that time, my dad was at an age it was hard for him to do it, and my other brothers all had jobs. So we all worked on the farm in our spare time, I guess you'd call it. And it was a dairy farm, and we raised hay and grain. And I met my wife in about 2000. Well, I should know this off the top of my head. No, about 73. She was a secretary at the Tax Commission when I'd come in from on the end of the week after being gone all week. I would visit with her, and we started dating, and we ended up getting married, and she, we had an apartment for about 3 months in Salt Lake, and I just couldn't take living in Salt Lake. We were right on 33rd South, and that was the route to the hospital and everything, and every time a siren went by, being from a small town, you always went to help and see what you could do. And I was up and down all night. So about 3 months later, we moved back up here and lived in an apartment here on First South for about a year until we started building this house. And we built this house in 1976 and been here ever since. We have four kids. My oldest is a daughter, Amanda. She lives in Heber now, and she's the director for Wasatch and Summit County in the Family Services. My next is my son Colby, and he's an electrician by trade. He has his own company that he does a lot of work in Park City and the big homes in the Summit County area. My next son is Alex. Alex is also an electrician, but he don't like doing it every day. So he worked for Wasatch County in the Public Works Department, where there's always something different. And he's the primary electrician for Wasatch County in their Public Works area. My youngest son is Grady, and he started out working for the law enforcement as a guard down the prison, and he worked there 5 years, and he said, this is not for me, so he went to work out in Midway as a contract negotiator, a private defense contractor, and he worked there 5 years, and Then he got an opportunity to go to work for a company name of 03 Harris, a large private defense contractor. And they're out of Salt Lake, and he's working there now. And he goes down there 2 days a week. Then he works out of his home 3 days a week. And him and the other son, Alex, they both just built a new house, one on the south end of the property and the one right next door. Grady moved in October, and Alex is hoping to move into his house the end of January or the first part of February. I've had a busy life. I enjoyed everything I do. I enjoyed working for the Tax Commission and going to all these little small towns. And I often said I had more friends out of town than I did at home, because I got to know them all. And in spending that many years, they became just like family. And then I retired from there and went right into the county council, and I spent 20 years on the county council and enjoyed every minute of that too. It was a hard transition to make, and I'm having a very difficult time making that transition right now, but I'm working on it. I got involved with the irrigation company. My dad was on the board of directors since the early 40s. And at that time, they used to clean all the canals and have to go and help. And so I always helped them with that. And he passed away in 1979. And the irrigation board came to me at that time and said, would you take your dad's position on the irrigation company? And I agreed to. I stayed there. And then in 1990, 91, I think, it's somewhere around that period, Dave Wilson was the president of the irrigation company, and he passed away, suddenly passed away. And the board asked me if I'd take the chair as the president. And I've been the president since 1991, 1990, somewhere through there. And since that time, the irrigation company has made a transition from flood irrigation to pressurized irrigation. We put in the system we've been working on designing the system and trying to figure out how we'd pay for it. And in the 2000 Olympics game, they needed to have a way of getting water, snowmaking water, down to Soldier Hollow. And they came to us and said, how can we do that? And we told them we were just putting in a secondary irrigation system. But we needed, we were trying to get a loan from the Board of Water Resources, and we needed some upfront money. And we sat down and negotiated a contract with them that we'd provide the snowmaking water for the Olympics, and they would give us $1 million in advance. I mean, before our project got started. Well, we went ahead and made an arrangement with the Board of Water Resources. They took the $1 million as a letter of credit on the $1 million as our cash portion of it. And we borrowed $12 million to put the irrigation system in. And in that time before the Olympics, we put the irrigation system in. And not only just for the Olympics, for every home in the community. And that has really been a positive thing that's helped with the city's culinary water supply. People was not using the culinary water supply for irrigation anymore, so that increased their ability. And I remember the time they kind of rationed water because we didn't have enough, and we worked with the city prior to about 1995, we had a very unusual working relationship with the city. They kept saying they wanted to take more water out of the springs, but they didn't own enough water to take any out. The irrigation company owned all the springs. The only spring we didn't own was the Gerber Spring. And the city has 2 second feet of water coming out of that. That was their supply. And it was exceeding that, and so they started working on some of the other springs, and we would have to sue them. We spent more money on lawsuits than we did on maintenance. And in 1995, Steve Ridge and Gene Owens. Steve Ridge was the mayor just going out, and Gene Owens was coming in. We sat down and said, let's come up with a workable relationship, how we can work together. And we created the Midway Water Advisory Board at that point. And since 95 to this date, we've got a great working relationship with the city, and things is greatly improved.
Steve, were historically the water rights divvied up, and also who planned even though it was a flood irrigation system?
That was the old. Our forefathers, when they came into the valley, they settled along the creeks, and they determined they knew they had to have irrigation water. So they settled along the creeks, and then at different points they put diversion into the Snake Creek to move water out so they could irrigate. And they did that on Snake Creek and Pine Creek, and then it got to the point that every individual would take in a little bit of water, so they came to the conclusion they had to organize into a company so that they could share the water and make it go further. And so in about 1887, I think, or something, the irrigation company was started, and it was funny because looking at the minutes back in them days, they were both done in English and in German. So it was 2-minute books, and then as time revolved and we got more need for the water, we was able to get water out of the Provo River and divert it in, and our forefathers did a great job in establishing the water rights and protecting it so that we could have it here now. So.
Tell me some interesting stories with the water in the valley. I'm sure there were. When I moved here, there was a moratorium shortly after.
Oh, there was one, and it's famous they dug a tunnel up here called the Snake Creek Tunnel. And that Snake Creek Tunnel goes in 15,000 feet into the mountain under Park City. And the Park City mines dug that tunnel to lower the water level in the mines so they could go deeper for the lead and silver and there. And we've got about 40 second feet of water coming out of that one tunnel. And a guy by the name of Murdoch came up and filed on that water and was going to transfer it down to the Orme bench area. And in doing so, that was going to dry up a lot of the water that we had. And so at one time there was a Johnny Sulzer with a picture of him on a headgate with a shotgun, telling him that we're not going to take our water. And the irrigation company at that time filed in district court to keep the water. and the district court ruled against the irrigation company. So we went to the state Supreme Court, and the state Supreme Court ruled against the irrigation company. And so we went on right on to the U.S. Supreme Court, and the U.S. Supreme Court ruled in favor, reversed the decisions made by the state Supreme Court, and reversed it to give the water back to the irrigation company. Said even though it was a new point of diversion, by taking that water out of that point and transferring, you reduce the flows in all the other springs and tributaries into the Snake Creek area. So they rewarded that water back to Midway. And but water's always been an issue, and we don't have near the problems now that we used to have. There was more fights on water than there was anything else. But we've got a great system now, and we've been recognized all over the state for one. And we even they asked us to put together a video or something that we'd go to the soil conservation meetings and outline how we came up with a working relationship with the city and how we share the water and we'll
unusual for,
huh?
Is it unusual?
Very
for the city
unusual,
and
very
area?
unusual, because most of the time people's competing for that water. The municipalities is competing for the irrigation water and vice versa. But we've been able to overcome that.
So I was told to ask you from Craig Simon, to talk about some, with Lundin's and whatever, some interesting story with you and the original people, or the long-time irrigation, and maybe that was it.
That was it. That was probably one of the ones. There's always been some individual arguments over water, but since we put the pressurized irrigation system in,
So how did you actually get all the way to was it the Supreme Court
mm-hmm.
that you said for the water rights?
The U.S. Supreme Court.
And you didn't have the backing of the state at all?
No, we didn't.
So how did you even find that? The lawyers?
This was back in the early 30s.
Okay.
And we just, the forefathers of the irrigation company just were so persistent. They knew that was their water and they was going to fight to keep it. But
okay, I am gonna, so I've heard you talk on the council meeting several times, and I really admire the way that when you verbally talk to a public hearing. So, especially about the preservation of our culture and the valley's demands.
well, yeah, I think that's the primary thing that makes this valley so desirable is our rural heritage and culture, and we're losing that. We're having so much growth and so many people coming in with a whole different point of view of what's taking place and what they want to see. A lot of them want to see exactly what they saw when they left, where they're coming from. If they're coming from California, not many years, they want to see more things like California had. And in order to keep our rural heritage, we've got to find a way to preserve some of this farmland. And it was probably 8 years ago that we got together and put on the ballot an initiative to go for a bond for $10 million to help buy open space. And we put that on the ballot. And it was on probably close to when the high school was on. The high school failed, and that one passed. People wanted. We had over 70% approval rating on that. So we went ahead and created what called the Wasatch Open Lands Board, and we've been working with people to put a conservation easement on their property. And we've been very successful because every dollar we spend, we've been able to leverage it with other money. So it's like an 8-to-1. For every $1 we spend, we get in $8 through other contributions, through the NRCS or the Lee Ray McAllister Fund or private donations. And it's been very successful. We was able to preserve the Kohler Farm, the Mountain Spa, a number of parcels in the North Fields. We was hoping to be able to work with the Lundeen family and preserve the 119 acres, but we can't. We've got to get an agreement in place where we do that, because when we're dealing with taxpayers' money, we got to be very careful, make sure we got it secured. And with the Lundeens, we can't put a conservation easement on the property for about 3 years because they want us to put up that money up front and let them go 3 years to see if they get additional funding. And that's a great way to do it, a great way of doing it, but we have to have some kind of security on that money, and that's where the hang-up is now. But it's moving strong. That's one of the things I hated to leave the county. I was honored middle of December, the Extel Corporation, which built that big hotel up in the Jordanelle Basin, had us up there to a supper or meeting, and then they turned around and honored me by giving me $1 million. The Extel donated $1 million to Utah Open Lands to be used to buy open space in the North Fields. And it was in a fund named after me, so I was quite honored to have that. And it's very good.
Steve, anything you want to add before I'm going to ask you the last one, which is, anything?
It's just been I've had a great life. And here in the Valley, I've often thought of maybe it's time to move out. So I've got in the car, my wife and I got in the car and went to Montana, Idaho, and the further away we get from home, the better home looks. So we're staying here, and now that the boys are starting to build on the farm and the grandkids are here to help with the chores, it's good.
Tell me about your farming now. What you're doing?
I'm still farming. Me and my son Alex, we're still farming our ground plus about another 100 acres of people we lease from. I lease some of the old timers that the kids moved away and they don't want to sell the ground, so they're still hanging on. I lease that, and a lot of the new people come in and buy the ground, and then they need somebody to take care of it. So we're still actively involved with that.
Cattle? What are you farming? Alfalfa?
We raise alfalfa and use oats as a rotational crop, and we cut it all for hay, and we sell it locally. I just see a guy go out here with 5 bales in the back of his truck. I don't know how he did that, but he did it. We still put them up in small bales. We don't do the big bales because a lot of people can't handle the big bales. So we sell a lot to the Park City area and to the local people. And I raise 12 head of steers every year, one for each of the kids as a Christmas present, a processed beef every year, and then we sell. So.
Okay. So what is your life, since life is full of experiences, trials and tribulations, any wisdom that you want to share with us now, just from your lessons in life?
I think that what I like to say is that we need to be open-minded to everybody that comes, because they all got a reason or a purpose, and we shouldn't be shutting them out. We should understand their side of the story before we take a stand. And with the new people coming in, we need to put forth an effort to bring them into the group. So I used to laugh at my mother. She'd get so mad at my dad. She'd send him to the post office, which is about a half-mile away, and it would take him 5 hours.
What? Why?
He'd visit with everybody. He knew everybody in town.
That's great.
And they just stand up there on the post office, or when the old post office was over in the town hall, and Kay Probst was the postmaster. They'd visit and visit and visit. And about 2 years ago, someone called my son and said, "Do you know a Bill Farrell?" And he said, "Yeah, I got an uncle Bill, and my grandpa was named Bill." And he said, "Well, we was over riding, and we came across this tree up in Red Pine and just up behind Park City, and it had Bill Farrell's name in it, and he'd carved." And Alex said, "Well, that's even my," and he says, the date on it was August 17th, 1917. And he said, Alex said, "Well, that's got to be my grandpa." And so he got me, and we went over there and looked at it, and found it, and looked at it. And it was a great big aspen tree in the middle of pines. I don't know why it lasted so long.
Yeah, aspens
And
are not known for that.
the kid went and got a chainsaw, and he says, "Here, let's cut it." And I said, "Oh, you don't want to cut that tree down." He says, "That tree's more important to you than it is to me." And so we cut that section out of that tree, and I've got it out in my barn.
Yeah, I'm surprised because aspens just,
Yeah.
they're what,
They don't-
20 years?
Yeah,
30
but
years
this one,
late.
and you could see it quite well. Bill Farrell, August 17th, 1917. And that back there is the saddle he came with. On the,
Oh, there it
yeah,
is,
yeah.
That's your great-grandfather's?
That's my dad.
Your dad's?
Yeah. He was born in 1895.
And why did he come over from Ireland?
We don't know.
Oh, you don't?
We don't
He
know.
wasn't part of the LDS?
No, he never did join the church. And my grandparents on my mother's side, even though they came home over with the missionaries, neither one of them joined the church.
Even after they got here?
Even after they got here, until my grandmother got baptized. When I turned 8 years old, she got baptized the same day as I did, over in the old seminary building there on Main Street, and she was 85. She was 85 when she joined the church.